unexpected Florida election says about the political landscape. Jacksonville's mayor declines to sign or veto a local immigration bill. Duval school leaders officially ban their first book. Brentwood residents say they're being disrespected by City Hall, and the state tries to untangle the impact of new national tariffs. We'll talk about all that and more with our panel of journalists on our Friday Week in Review. Later, a local science fair celebrates natural inspiration for technological advancement. You can join the conversation on air by calling 904-549-2937 or emailing first.
I'm Corva Coleman. A report from the Labor Department this morning shows a jump in hiring last month. NPR's Scott Horsley reports U.S. employers added 228,000 jobs in March.
The pace of hiring last month was stronger than the month before and stronger than forecasters had expected. Jobs were added in healthcare and hospitality. Thousands of retail workers also returned to the job after a strike. Meanwhile, the federal government cut about 4,000 jobs in March, according to the official tally, in addition to 11,000 jobs eliminated the month before. The numbers are based on a survey conducted in the middle of each month. Overall, federal layoffs are significantly larger. Average wages in March were up 3.8% from a year ago, which is likely more than enough to outpace inflation. The unemployment rate inched up to 4.2% as 232,000 people joined or rejoined the workforce. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
The markets are not buoyed by the jobs news. Investors are still reacting to President Trump's global tariffs. On Wall Street and pre-market trading, Dow futures are down about 1,100 points. Trump's 10% tariffs on all imported goods take effect tomorrow. Trump's overall tariffs on China are much higher. Now, China has hit back. Starting in less than a week, China will impose its own tariffs on U.S. goods of 34%. Trump's tariffs target a lot of goods U.S. companies do not make. And as NPR's Alina Selyuk reports, when U.S. companies do produce the goods, they often cost more than imported ones.
The reality is, for so many things, clothes, shoes, toys, electronics, the U.S. has not manufactured them at scale in ages or ever. And so, one shopkeeper says she sells work boots. She has American-made boots. They are $400. Not everyone can afford that. So she also has imported ones that are half the price.
NPR's Alina Selyuk reporting. The head of the National Security Agency and his deputy have been fired, according to two prominent Democrats in Congress. As NPR's Greg Myrie reports, this marks the latest dismissal of a senior military officer by the Trump administration.
Air Force General Timothy Hawk served just over a year as director of the NSA, the spy agency that collects cyber intelligence worldwide. Senator Mark Warner and Representative Jim Himes, the top Democrats on the Senate and House Intelligence Committees, issued late-night statements criticizing the firing. The NSA declined to comment on the dismissal of Hawk and his deputy, Wendy Noble, who is a civilian. The move came just hours after several members of the National Security Council at the White House were also fired. The Trump administration previously dismissed several top military officers, including the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General C.Q. Brown. Greg Myrie, NPR News, Washington.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning, I'm Stephen Ponson. It's 9:04. Jacksonville City Council member Rory Diamond withdrew two proposals this week that would have modified land use regulations to allow for more housing in the form of duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes to be built in more areas of the city. Diamond previously said that the measures were part of an effort to provide more housing options for Jacksonville's growing population. But the bills faced organized opposition from residents in areas like San Jose who were concerned about increased density and potential infrastructure issues, according to news partners at the Jacksonville Daily Record. Councilmember Raul Aries, who opposed Diamond's bills, agrees that there's a need for more affordable housing, but says solving the issue requires more discussion. A community meeting to update residents on plans for the fourth segment of the city's Emerald Trail through the Brentwood, Springfield, and Phoenix communities is set for this weekend. The Emerald Trail is a planned 30-mile walking and biking path around Jacksonville's urban core that will eventually link 14 historic neighborhoods and 21 parks. Planning teams from the city, Groundwork Jacksonville, and the Jacksonville Transportation Authority will be on hand to talk about the project, answer people's questions, and listen to their concerns. The meeting is set for 11 tomorrow morning at Emerald Station on North Laura Street in downtown. For more information, go to jtafla.com. Warm and muggy this afternoon in Jacksonville, as we'll have mostly sunny skies. Temperatures will be in the lower 90s inland, low to mid 80s along the coast.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, supporting creative people and effective institutions committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information is at macfound.org.
Reporter at Jacksonville Today. Good morning, Will.
Good morning, Ann.
Frank Powers, veteran newsman and former assigned
reading and ways you can read it, but there are currently 4 seats open in the House, or 5 seats open in the House, which is a very slim majority for the Republicans. There are 4 seats that are going to be filled, or actually, let me back up. The Republicans have a 5-seat majority in the House, and there are 4 seats open. 2 went Republican as expected this week, and 2 are probably going to go Democrat. So at the end of the day, they will maintain that very slim 5-seat majority. There is a couple interesting things that happened looking at the Florida races. There's a lot of people, a lot of Democrats trying to read a lot into the fact that Escambia flipped to be blue after, for the first time since the 1960s, and also that the Democrats put up a pretty strong showing in that very red CD6 district. I try not to read too much into special elections because it's really a different group of voters than turn out for November. The Escambia County flip, I've looked at that pretty hard, and the major thing that I can determine there is the number one employer in Escambia County is the federal government, DOD. There's 3 major military installations there, and with what's happening with DOJ and federal layoffs and all that, you had to believe that had a huge impact on why Escambia, in a very red congressional district, flipped to being Democrat. Whether that means a lot for the midterms, I think that really is going to depend on what happens with the economy between now and the midterms.
And you talked about Congressional District 6. That's to the south of us here. That was the seat that was vacated by Michael Waltz, who is now the National Security Advisor. But it was a very tough race. It was closer than a lot of people expected. It was an incredibly expensive race.
It was. And to me, the big takeaway, big picture takeaway from that race is money is less and less important in politics. I mean, if you look at both Wisconsin, where Musk poured tons of money in that race and it basically was wasted. And you look at the CD6 race in Florida, where we are outspent fine 12-1. And still lost. Now he made some ground, and he took a seat that.
And we should say Josh Wheel is the Democrat, and Randy Fine is the Republican.
And you're looking at a seat that Trump took by 30 points in November, and the Democrats are saying, well, look, they only took it by 10 points in this week. There is no second place in politics, so that's nice to say. But I think to me the big takeaway, and I've seen this in a lot of races, and this is talked about in a lot of the political consultant circles. In this time right now, money, which used to be the dominant factor in most races, is becoming less and less a factor in who wins and loses. If you look at November, the Democrats outspent the Republicans by $1 billion and still got crushed. So the question in my mind, looking at races and especially the midterm, is, okay, if money is no longer the deciding factor in races, which we're seeing time and time again, what is? I mean, it comes a lot to redistricting and how important that is.
Yeah, Frank.
I think the answer is anger.
Anger, exactly.
The angrier electorate is the one that goes out. As John pointed out, in special elections, turnout is low. But look at these numbers for the 4 counties in the district that was won by Mr. Fine. St. John's and Flagler both had about 40%. Putnam County had 30%. Volusia County had 33%. People were motivated to go out and vote.
Yeah. But to say that money doesn't matter, I mean, certainly it must have had something to do with the vote being as close as it was. We know that, Josh Wheel way overperformed compared to what previous elections had been in that area. He spent $12 million versus Randy Fine's kind of somewhere between 1 and 3. But I mean, so there was a ton of money there. That must have been some vehicle for getting him closer.
Yeah, and I think if you look at it, I mean, Republicans are worried about races where Trump is not on the ballot. Certainly, Trump not being on the ballot had an impact. What I talked to reporters who were down in Volusia County covering the election, they said they had Trump signs in front of the polls, not fine signs. So that is going to be an issue for the midterms. But again, I think Frank is right. What we're seeing now in the Democratic Party is sort of the Democratic equivalent of what you saw with the Tea Party movement after Obama's election. It's about enthusiasm and anger and how that motivates voters to get to the poll.
Well,
wasn't some of the anger that created the Tea Party of, oh, we have a black president, we can't let this happen anymore?
That was a big part of it. Yeah,
that's part of the Tea Party.
Disguised as fiscal austerity.
Yeah,
exactly. Disguised as a lot of different things. Maybe it's the '90s kid in me, but I just think of like the Brandy song "Almost Doesn't Count."
Right.
Second, or what do they say in Talladega Nights? Second place is first loser. So I mean, good job, good effort, but does it really matter? And I say that because people who are in the sound of our show, incumbents don't lose in Congress. They retire, but they don't get beat. The only person within pretty much 90 miles of here who's lost a congressional race in the last 30 years is John Mika. And that was because there was redistricting included parts of Orange County in that district that I would think Orange, Volusia, parts of Flagler.
I've forgotten about John Mika.
So I say that to say, the Charles Bennett's, the Tilly Fowlers, the Andrew Crenshaws, Kareem Browns even, they don't lose. Yeah. They retire.
Well,
so getting into Congress
but, yeah.
is getting that incumbency is vitally important.
I wonder too, though, about, we're talking a lot about the Florida race, Ashley, but there was, this very contested Wisconsin race in which Elon Musk was a major factor. He was giving money away to people who were, signing petitions. There was a millions of dollars that he spent trying.
$25 million.
Yeah. And I saw in one story, I think it was Politico, saying that voters imposed a Musk tax on the GOP, that basically this became a referendum about him as much as anything else.
I think that what happened in Wisconsin is kind of an eye-opener for sure. I think the message there is that Wisconsin voters couldn't be bought. That's what I took from that. One thing that stood out to me, at least here in Florida, with the Josh Wheel and Randy Fine situation, even though Josh Wheel ended up losing, as you mentioned, he did out-fundraise rather. But I do think he also marketed himself in such a way that was really consistent with more people at home. Single father, teacher.
Mm-hmm.
There are more people who have those things in common, those qualities in common, as opposed to, say, Randy Fine.
Yeah.
And I wondered if some of that factored into it, because we definitely saw the numbers were interesting there. But as he said, first loser,
after Randy Fine won, the tension that has always existed in recent years between our governor and Randy Fine really sort of broke through the surface in a new and ugly way.
Squishy way.
The governor called him a squish, called him repellent. Is this just old-fashioned bad blood, or is this like a sign of deeper party fractures?
It's bad blood. No doubt about it. Remember, Fine at first endorsed the governor in his presidential run, and then flipped that endorsement to Trump, and that just deepened the angst between the two men, and it'll continue to be a factor in Florida politics.
I remember a few years ago, even before that Governor DeSantis vetoed some funding for the Brevard Zoo that Randy Fine was actively trying to get passed in the Florida legislature. And I asked some family members and close friends who tell the full truth to me, not the, Will's a reporter truth, and who live in Brevard. And they told me how absolutely unlikable Randy Fine is to many of his constituents in Brevard County. Yeah. Among Republicans in Brevard County, not just Democrats in Brevard County.
Yeah, certainly, he's not real popular among his colleagues.
No. And DeSantis was playing that up even as votes were being made.
Of course, DeSantis wasn't real popular among his colleagues either when he was in Congress.
And as Frank said, that feud goes back a while to the flip that Fine did in the presidential race. But I think at the end of the day, even though DeSantis did do some harsh criticism of Fine this week while that race was pending, when the race was over and Fine won, Fine tweeted out, some sort of obnoxious tweet about DeSantis, burning brightly like a falling star. And there's some truth to the fact we're seeing it in the legislative session right now that the iron fist grip that DeSantis had on Florida's Republican Party is quickly fading away. We're going to see examples of that in this session, and then for the next 2 years, we're going to see more and more a fractured Republican Party in Florida.
I mean, what does the governor gain from further alienating someone that is going to be in Congress, though? What is the benefit there?
DeSantis and people in DeSantis' own party have said, he was emotional this week. I think he is a kind of politician who holds grudges, and I don't think he's going to be the kind of politician who would set aside a personal grudge for the good of his party or for the good of anything. I just think that bad blood between DeSantis and Fine is not going to go away.
We've got a call from Ed at NAS Jax. Good morning, Ed. Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Always a great show. Can't miss it. Even when I travel outside the country, I still listen to your show.
Awesome.
So it's a compliment to you all. Question. One thing that was interesting is in Wisconsin, where you had the vast majority of the voters go for the liberal judge, but at the same time, they voted for even a higher percentage for passing the voter ID requirement to vote in Wisconsin. And something that's interesting, if you look at it versus Florida, they are specifically mentioning 6 allowed voters' IDs to use. Florida allows 12 different forms of IDs, including, interestingly enough, homeowners associations, IDs. And this is the one that kind of drew me. Debit card and credit card can be used in Florida when you go vote as proof of identification.
Interesting. That's an interesting note. I do want to kind of segue, since that's a good note, into the debate this week over immigration here in the city of Jacksonville. This is a topic that was at the center of the local news universe here. Mayor Deegan deciding that she would neither sign nor veto council legislation on immigration. This is the first of its kind legislation at a city level in the country. And Ashley Harding, you were right in the center of that. I think you were covering dueling press conferences this week at City Hall. Tell us what happened.
Well, first off, it was very interesting because we were told about Councilman Carrico's press conference in front of at the steps of City Hall, and we had gotten word that he was going to formally call on her to sign the legislation. That was going to be at noon, so we were prepared for that. Next thing we know, that there's one from the mayor at 1 o'clock. It was like, oh, this will be interesting. Because whatever is decided, I'm going to have to go back to Councilman Carrico and get his response, even though he gave his powerful message. But, it was, we went upstairs, and I have to admit, my feelings were that the way she was speaking, my thoughts were, oh, she's going to veto this. And the thing is, if she had vetoed it, Councilman Carrico confirmed it, council was going to go back and work to override the veto. So that's something we were expecting. And, we just had that situation with Meridian Waste, and that turned into, I see you nodding at me. It's true. It turned into something of a political
hot potato.
Hot potato. That's the word. Exactly. At City Hall. So then, you got the council, general counsel involved and what have you. So, she laid out her reasons for not signing it. She mentioned the potential lawsuits. She said that this is a federal issue. And she also stressed that this bill doesn't do anything that the state law doesn't already do. She said that she was in favor of the one component of it for the funding for the 25 extra fingerprint scanners that JSO already uses. They already use about 150 of them. So it was and she was standing there with faith leaders and immigration attorneys, and all these people did share their stories. And on the other side of it, Councilman Carrico had council members behind him, and they shared their stories as well. And that included Councilman Ron Salem talking about his family immigrating Palestinian lineage. So it's very interesting. I do think politically she was in kind of a tough situation. Exactly, a box, because she knew where it was going to head. And one of the main concerns she brought up, though, was could this cost taxpayers money if we in fact do get sued? So that's going to be something to pay attention to. And one of the immigration attorneys did mention that they had heard about some possibilities on the horizon for that.
Yeah. I want to just take a listen to a little bit of what Mayor Deegan had to say, and then Frank, I want to get your response.
Right now, I'm hearing from people here lawfully who are terrified they will be swept up in all of this, whether it's meant for them or not. When people feel targeted, they are less likely to report crimes. They're less likely to seek medical help, send their children to school, or cooperate with police. That makes all of us less safe. I want to be crystal clear. I do not believe this bill is necessary, and I will not sign it.
So very strong words about the bill, but not vetoing it, Frank.
Well, one of the things that was hanging over this was the not so thinly veiled threat from the Attorney General, reminding her that there would be sanctions if she did veto it. And those sanctions under that new law that was passed include removal. And as we've seen, the governor is not hesitant to remove mostly Democrats so far, who he has been displeased by. You heard a word this week describing this bill as redundant. It doesn't do anything that's not already been done. As Ashley pointed out, JSO has lots of fingerprint processes, so we're going to get 25 more. One of the other provisions of the bill says that ICE has to be notified when an arrest is made of an illegal immigrant. That's been going on for years. How do I know? When I was at Channel 4, I would check the daily jail arrest log every day, and if somebody had a problem with their immigration status, there was a hold for ICE. That's been going on. So this doesn't really do anything that hasn't already been done.
But choosing not to veto it.
The only thing she could do.
Because she would invite, you're thinking it's the threat from the AG as opposed to just being a lightning rod.
She knew she was going to be overridden by the council.
Yeah. John, what is your take on that? I mean, the decision not to veto, she said she didn't want her name associated with this bill. There was obviously the threat of litigation, but it does seem that she would have become much more of a centerpiece and a lightning rod for this national debate on immigration.
Yeah, I mean, I think Frank's right. I think Mayor Deegan had she was kind of in a box, and I think she did the smart thing in not vetoing it. I think they wanted her to veto it. I tend to look at everything happening right now at City Council through the lens of the jockeying to see who's going to be the Republican to face Deegan in the next mayor's race. And you've got Howland and Salem and Carrico kind of all jockeying to see which one. I talked to a local Republican this week who had seen some internal polling on that race, and all those guys are polling in the mid 20s or lower, which sounds bad, but you got to figure that's the MAGA base, that 20, 25%, 28%. And you have to have that to get past the primary. So whereas, those guys, this issue, very near and dear to the heart of the MAGA base, is probably the kind of issue that's going to get one of those guys past that 28% threshold to make it through the Republican primary so they can face Deegan in the general. That's kind of what I see is behind all this, is trying to get their credentials up for that primary that's happening in the next mayor's race.
At the stake of people's lives.
So, Will,
Sure.
I mean, there certainly were people who saw this as a cop-out. There was a letter from the Jacksonville Immigrant Rights Alliance saying that they were profoundly disappointed, that they understood the political complexities involved, but they thought this was a missed opportunity to uphold Jacksonville's values of inclusion and justice.
They were big mad. And I'd spoken with members of the Jacksonville Immigrant Rights Alliance. They are people who are speaking up. They are United States citizens. They were born in the United States, but many of them are the children of immigrants. And they say specifically, we are speaking up because other people we know and love can't, because it might impact their immigration status or it might make their lives uncomfortable. And before this ordinance was allowed to pass, they genuinely believed that Deegan would veto it because this is something, because she has spoken about love thy neighbor probably more than any mayor that I've heard since I moved to Jacksonville. And they believed that she would put those words into practice by vetoing this bill, because this is something that the Immigrant Rights Alliance believed was the antithesis of love thy neighbor.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about this week's headlines. I'm joined by Ashley Harding, Will Brown, Frank Powers, and John Daigle. And if you'd like to join our conversation, we invite you to call 904-549-2937 or email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also reach out on social media. I've got a call I'd like to take from from Lisa in Tallahassee. Go ahead, Lisa.
Good morning. I am over in Tallahassee working as an activist in the legislature, and I just have this last couple of years had the experience of watching these immigration bills and what effect they have on some of Florida's major industries like hospitality and agriculture and construction. And they're having a lot of trouble finding employees. And the last 2 years, there's been a really disturbing move towards child labor. There's a bill in the legislature moving the age even further down from 16 to even 13 and 14. And the legislators from the First Coast are kind of the same ilk as the members of the city council who are going after the immigrants in the area. And they're not serving the benefit of the people that they represent on just about any of the bills that they're presenting. They're just kind of red meat issues for the Republicans. And if you could, I hope y'all are going to talk this morning about the Citizens Initiative that the House passed yesterday, and urge people to call their senators because it's coming up on that side of the legislature, and that is a devastating impact to democracy if it passes.
Thanks, Lisa. And that is a reference to some additional hurdles that would be put in place to bring citizens' initiatives and ballot amendments. Got a call from Linda in Mandarin. Good morning, Linda. Go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to discuss, and we get in this, I seem like we get into these circles. So we are really more focusing on why Mayor Deegan did not veto a piece of legislation that the city council probably had the numbers to override, versus putting a microphone in the face of every Republican that's sponsoring this, that, you know, they always tell us immigration is a federal issue. So why is our city council getting paid to waste time to not address local issues, but doing virtue signaling that, oh, we're doing something about that so they can run against the mayor? Let's not get caught up in what the mayor stated her stance, knowing the implications of this crazy governor would probably move to remove her and she'd have to fight to get back to be our mayor. Let's focus on the people who put this legislation in front of us and ask them why. What did you accomplish and how much money did you spend on this? And why aren't you doing things about, you know, for the city when this is a federal issue? We have enough issues at the federal level. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Linda. Will Brown.
Yeah, I spoke with Jared Nordland with Unitas US, which is a the largest civil rights organization for Latinos in the country. Jared really focuses on Florida issues. Spoke with him this week about this particular legislation. And to the caller's point, he said this is a redundant law. He also said that local police should not be forced to enforce federal laws. He's not saying that federal law should be ignored. It is just that federal law should be enforced by federal law enforcement, and local law should be enforced by local law enforcement. Nordland specifically said racial profiling will go up because of this ordinance, because there are people who are very much in the country legally, whether citizens or green card holders, or for now have temporary protected status. We'll find out if that's still a thing next week. Will be potentially ensnared by JSO because of this ordinance and legislation that just passed.
Well, I'm curious what you all are hearing. I mean, there obviously is a very large chunk of the community that is sort of a conservative element of the community that is aligned with, development, home builders, for instance, and criminalizing the presence of people who don't have documentation within city limits would seem to be something that could have implications for people, for instance, that are in the business of building. We know that there's a huge population of immigrant labor, not necessarily undocumented immigrant labor, but at a time when people are just sort of losing status as temporary protected status at the federal level, losing their ability to renew their visas and things like that. It does seem that there are a lot of people that could be finding themselves in a difficult situation that would not necessarily want to be on a work site in Jacksonville.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's the same problem with the strawberry pickers down in Volusia County and other places in Florida that rely on immigrant labor. But we're still in an environment, and the builders and the farmers know that, and they realize that it's costing them money and hurting them. But for the time being, we're still in an environment when it comes to Republican primaries that the most MAGA wins, and that's why we got Randy Fine. And at least for the time being, probably until after the midterms, the Republican Party will still be in this grips of whoever's the most MAGA wins the primary. And until we get past that, that's going to be the determining factor on legislation and almost everything any elected leader on the Republican side does.
But do we really want 14-year-olds working 8 hours a day
No,
or
we
extended
don't.
hours?
Absolutely not.
That would seem like a pretty bipartisan issue of, do we really want 14-year-olds working more?
They're working more because older Americans don't want those jobs that are supposedly being taken by illegal immigrants.
I do think it's a well-placed source alerted me to something from the ACLU, actually before I got in here. So this is a release, but I'll go ahead and just read this.
Breaking news.
If you say so, Will. Anyway, it says the American Civil Liberties Union of Florida, ACLU Immigrants' Rights Project, and Americans for Immigrant Justice filed a federal lawsuit challenging Florida's new extreme anti-immigrant law, Senate Bill 4C, which authorizes state and local law enforcement to imprison people based on their manner of entering the country. And it goes on to say the lawsuit filed in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida is brought on behalf of the Farm Worker Association of Florida, the Florida Immigrants Coalition, and also individual plaintiffs. So you see it right now. I mean, this is a state situation, but it goes to show you that the response is going to be there from the legal community. And, to your point, mentioned Farm Worker Association, these are jobs that a lot of people don't want, and they do rely on that immigrant population to fulfill those jobs and those needs for individual municipalities and communities.
I don't see JSO putting as a priority going to construction sites or farms and trying to find out who's here legally and who's not here legally. The administration of DK Waters has been laser focused on reducing violent crime, which they have done a great success on. The homicide rate's been literally cut in half. I doubt that they would want to do something that would mess up that momentum in bringing down violent crime.
But it's a trust. I would say it's more of a trust issue, because I totally agree with you that the anecdotally and the data shows that violent crime, or specifically murders in Jacksonville, have decreased under the stewardship of Sheriff TK Waters. But I sometimes say, when I say a trust issue, it is if someone is legally in the United States legally, but they might communicate or be in community with people whose status may not be known, are they going to are they going to feel comfortable calling JSO if they need the police? That is that's what I think might be the question. Not that JSO is vile or bad or anything like that. It is that sometimes people who might need JSO might be more hesitant to call JSO because they don't want to bring law enforcement around because there's someone whose immigration status may be up in the air.
It's interesting. I mean, I remember years ago when Sheriff Rutherford actually created an outreach task force to specifically address that, because there was concerns that the local community of immigrants, documented or undocumented, were fearful of reaching out to police. And so there was this spate of crimes that were specifically targeting
they were targeted,
them.
right.
Wow.
There was like about 7 murders one year
And a lot of robberies and break-ins.
Because they were being paid under the table. They had large quantities of cash on them. And the suspects who were aware of that were targeting them exactly for that reason.
Yeah, and so there was this broad effort by law enforcement to actually bridge that divide that you're talking about, Will. I'm going to take a call from Les on the west side. Good morning, Les. Go ahead.
Good morning. Fascinating topic. I just would like to ask your panel, what could Trump or any president have done to draw manufacturing back over to the United States besides tariffs? And I'll take your answer off the line. Thank you.
That's a good question. A lot of people obviously talking about tariffs right now. John, Liberation Day declared this week, and since then, a lot of kind of chaos in the market. A lot of concern here in Florida about the impacts to the economy on all sorts of levels: tourism, home building. But the goal, the president says, is to bring back manufacturing.
Yeah, and I think time will tell whether Trump. Basically, the Republican Party line now is, hey, we have to go through some pain in order to bring jobs back to America. And the pain, of course, is the tariffs and what's happening to the economy. Time will tell whether that theory holds up. I'm not an economist, and I'm not going to debate whether tariffs, will bring jobs back or not. But, ultimately, I think, it's hard to find Americans who are willing to work at that level. And I mean, that's the truth. And whether, as we just talked about, whether it's picking strawberries or putting roofs on houses, those are the jobs that Americans are not willing to do. And mostly we need immigrant labor to do those jobs. So, whether at the same time you're putting these tariffs in an effort to create new manufacturing jobs, my question is, do we have a labor force willing to take those jobs?
Frank.
The evidence suggests not. I thought I saw a statistic just this week that 40% of home construction crews are immigrants. Remove them from the equation. What do you got? Florida that's one of the strongest parts of the Florida economy, that and tourism. And in the tourism industry, especially in the hotel and restaurant, a lot of those are immigrants. Take them out. Who's going to fill all those jobs? Oh, that's right, 13 and 14-year-olds.
Right.
Well, in terms of tourism, Ashley, I mean, another concern about just sort of the impact of these tariffs is whether people are going to sour on traveling. And we know that Florida is obviously one of the biggest destinations for international travel. Most of the people coming internationally to Florida are from Canada. And we know that there have been some, obviously a lot of tensions there. There's these billboards on I-95 and I-10 now saying, tariffs are taxes paid for by the government of Canada.
Exactly. That's something I'm going to be watching because I'm genuinely curious about that. I'm interested to see what's going to happen as a result of all this. Because, we live in Florida. We live where people party and hang out and visit and have fun. It's true, though. We live in a beautiful state, and we're lucky to do so. And tourism is a big part of not just, our income and our revenue, but it's part of our identity. So I think it'll be interesting to see what comes of that. It's something that I'm curious about. And are there going to be numbers? Are we going to see numerically the results? And I think that's a conversation to be had.
But I think it's important to I agree with what you're saying, to contextualize it, because there's some parts of Florida where Canadians come in large droves. I am a Sarasota native, so I learned about what Canadian provinces were which because I'd see the license plates of Canadians driving all around Sarasota as a child.
That's fabulous.
So it's like, oh, Ontario, okay. Quebec, Newfoundland. I mean, seriously, I would see that many different Canadian license plates. So the Canadians who might visit Sarasota might be different than the ones who visit the Mouse, might be different from the ones who go to St. Augustine. And so it's important to I think it's important to contextualize where people are coming from, because I think in our neck of the woods, like, a lot of our international travelers are European. And so,
But again, I mean, the tariffs and just sort of the energy around, the actions of this administration have made people in Europe as well, look askance in some cases at the United States.
I mean, I think the wildest thing about all of the things that are going on is, like, I think I saw this on a national newscast, and I was like, this is unbelievable. And I want to break it down for, like, the federal officials were alleging that someone needed to be deported because they had gang ties, because they had a Real Madrid tattoo. I'm like, Real Madrid? Are we really? Real Madrid is the most famous soccer team in the world. I'm like, that'd be like deporting somebody who had a Jags tattoo on their forearm.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there has been some association between that tattoo and people that were gang members. I mean, I don't think that was completely.
But the crest of, like, Real Madrid is ubiquitous across the world. I mean,
many people love Real Madrid.
Yes,
probably have their tattoo.
Exactly. Like, there are people who are absolute dorks who have have a Real Madrid tattoo.
I want to take a call from John in Riverside. Good morning, John. Go ahead.
Good morning. What I want to say, I think the thing about bringing industry back in the United States is a red herring with this. I think their real intention is to switch us from a progressive income tax system to a system of consumption taxes, national sales tax. The tariffs would be part of that. In addition to that, if they blow the roof off of inflation, Social Security payments will be adjusted to that inflation, which will further threaten the Social Security trust fund.
Yeah, well, no doubt a enormous range of impacts that can be expected, and we're just going to start to see it right now, Frank. I mean, there's a long road ahead.
There is a reality that's not going to change, and that is all well and good to say, buy American. Great. We all want to do that. But buy American means you're willing to pay a higher price. And Americans want quality for sure, but they want a lower price. I was listening to an interview with a woman from the Midwest, I forget, somewhere in the Midwest. She runs a boot store, and she has American-made boots in her store at $400. She also has imported boots for $200. Guess which one sells better?
Yeah, the cost of manufacturing obviously much higher.
Super quick, these tariffs might have a massive impact on Jacksonville because we're such a port city. We processed 500,000 cars last fiscal year at Jacksport. The Longshoremen Union has 1,800 members. If the tariffs mean that there are fewer imports, that means there is fewer business. There's less business for the longshoremen who process the containers that come to the port. There's less business for the trucking companies, and there's potentially less business for CSX, which literally one of the financial hallmarks of Jacksonville-based CSX is intermodal business, which takes literally containers off the ship onto rail and puts it on their system. So the local ramifications of these tariffs could be massive in our transportation and logistics sector.
Yeah, cascading impacts. I want to move on now to a topic that was also in the headlines this week. It was the first time, I think surprisingly, that the Duval County tackled the issue of whether to ban a book. And they chose to ban a book. It's a book called Identical. It's a young adult novel. It deals with difficult subjects, including incest. And it had been the subject of concern by parents, Frank, who initially were kind of reading aloud from this book at a meeting.
Oh, yes, and somebody got removed from that meeting. Anybody who wants to be on a school board nowadays, I give them a lot of credit. That's just you're asking for things that probably didn't go into your initial decision to get into politics. But the meeting the other day was tense. Somebody almost got removed. This book had been removed from the shelves, 2 years ago, I think, for the review. It took this long for the Duval County School Board to review one title. I mean, you look at the way that the school boards are going in Clay County, St. Johns County. Clay County, by the way, leads not just Florida, but the nation in book bannings, thanks largely to the intervention of one man. But it's, I think most people are doing the right thing. I don't really want my kid to read this in school, but they can get it online. And a question I have for those parents, good. You should be shielding your children from what you think is sensitive and age-inappropriate content, but are you watching to see what they're doing on their computers up in their room?
That point.
Yeah.
Say it again for the parents who need to hear it again.
Like I said, most people, I think, are honest in their views and what they're trying to do. There are others that are just grandstanding for the attention, sadly.
When you talk about a subject like this book covers, Ashley, it is an ugly subject. It is a subject that it would be very difficult to write about without offending someone's sensibility, because nobody wants to read about a father abusing his daughter. And this is told from the perspective of the girl. And yet there are, many, many, many kids who are in similar circumstances that need also to know that that's not something that is unique to them.
Exactly. It's a terrible subject. For me, it comes down to you're a parent. I'm a parent. I have a 9-year-old. What he reads or is exposed to, that's my job. It's my job to know and to understand what my child is reading. And I will tell you, there are some things that he has seen on television where I said, "Oh no, sir," that, and my husband as well. That's us parenting. And I think what's interesting about the book bans is, is there a slippery slope somewhere? I'm thinking back to when I was in high school. I had a teacher who, it was not my class, but the year prior, she was going to assign Dracula. By the way, that's one of my favorite books. It's an incredible book. Bram Stoker is an amazing storyteller who can really get into the human imagination, which in my opinion is the most terrifying thing on earth. But that's beside the point. I could talk about Dracula all day. But the point is that this parent did not want their child to read Dracula and asked that it not be read to the entire class, that the entire class not read it. And her reasons were, she pointed to religious reasons, which is fine. I fully understand that, but it's also, is there what is there a reasonable, what at what point is it reasonable? Do you know what I mean by reasonable? You have one end of the spectrum here and the other end of the
I
spectrum
mean, it
here.
obviously depends on kind of where
Right.
you are, right?
Where you are. And,
And I guess that's the
and
reason.
that's the tough part of this conversation.
But
But
I mean, John, the reason that people say, it should be perhaps left to parents to decide if they want their own kid to opt out, but not necessarily give them the permission to opt out everybody else's kid.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because there's mixed opinions on this particular book that we're talking about. And I agree with Will that says, you can ban that book, but these days it's almost impossible. I have two daughters myself, and, with the internet, if they want to access that kind of content, it's almost impossible to stop that. But it just bothers me that, again, this is a red meat MAGA issue that is such a distraction. The school board has so much more important things to be focused on, and we're sitting here talking about banning a book, and that's the headline, when there are major, major issues going on in our education system that should be much more high profile. It just irritates me that we have to sit around here and focus on all these, issues that just fire up 25% of voters because that's what it takes to win primaries.
Has DCPS actually closed that gap for their upcoming fiscal year? Like, was $100 million, and they're still
No.
trying.
I think that's the real question here. And to your point, there are other things that DCPS should be working to address. The school closures thing was a massive, massive conversation last year.
Yeah.
I would suggest that the fact that it took the school board 2 years to take up its first book ban is evidence that they are focused on higher priority items.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Will Brown, Ashley Harding, Frank Powers, John Daigle, thank you so much for being here today.
Pleasure.
Thank you for
Really
having us.
appreciate it. Up next, how nature is shaping the future of
Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. One texter call can wreck it all. Learn more through distracted driving presentations for teens and the workforce. Arrive alive. Let's end distracted driving.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com. DuPont Counseling Group is a team of therapists, psychiatrists, and counselors available to help with life's mental health challenges. Everyone needs help sometimes. More information can be found at jacksonvillecounseling.org.
This week on Science Friday, companies keep saying they're getting closer to artificial general intelligence.
How would you really test that, and how would you know when we've got there? And it's not clear at all that we'll get there on the current path.
Want to know more? You could ask the experts yourself on the next Science Friday from WNYC Studios.
This afternoon at 3 here on WJCT News 89.9.
On the next Florida Roundup, we will have a live studio audience from Jacksonville. It's the first city to criminalize illegal immigration, but it's not law just yet. How should a city enforce federal immigration laws? Email us radio@thefloridaroundup.org. Plus, a former WNBA commissioner has been exploring bringing a team to Jacksonville. Got any suggestions for a team name? Email radio@thefloridaroundup.org. I'm Tom Hudson. Then join us Friday noon until 1.
The word of the week?
Reciprocal. That means they do it to us and we do it to them.
On the Friday News Roundup, Trump's trade war escalates. Wisconsin goes to the polls in a referendum on Musk's influence, and a marathon speech on the Senate floor breaks a long-standing record. That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, some of the greatest human inventions were inspired by nature. It's called biomimicry, and it's the theme of the upcoming Jacksonville Science Festival. Here to tell us about it, I am joined by Amanda Lopez and Kendall Schmidt. Both are teacher and Science Festival advisors at the Foundation Academy. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're also joined by Ryan Garner and Abhishek Altenner, both fifth grade students and science fair participants. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. So, Amanda, this I think is your third year at Foundation Academy. What is the what's kind of special about the Science Festival time of year, and what generally speaking, is it for people who haven't been or aren't familiar?
So I love this time of year. The kids actually get to just deep dive into what they're genuinely passionate about. Abishai, for example, she wants to be a doctor when she grows up. So the topic that she's researching is medical needles. Ryan is interested in becoming an NFL player when he grows up. He loves football. So he is doing research on NFL helmets and the woodpecker. So the kids get to really just dive deep into their research and just studying what they love,
Yeah.
which is the best part about school.
Abishai, you want to be a doctor. Tell us a little bit about the research you're doing. What is this about needles? What's the connection to nature?
The medical needle was inspired by the mosquito. So this is an example for it. These two saw the skin. These two hold the skin open. And these find the blood vessel and drink the blood. And this injects the numbing saliva.
And so for people who can't see, it is actually like a bug that you've got. Each little talon that you're holding is a different colored pipe cleaner.
Yes.
And so it sort of demonstrates how they are able to extract blood and sort of do so somewhat painlessly.
Mhm.
And that's what a needle's modeled on.
Yes.
So that's something that we call biomimicry. And that's something that you're working on too, Ryan. Talk about the helmet and how the woodpecker's involved.
NFL helmets were inspired by the woodpecker. Woodpeckers inspired NFL helmets because scientists studied how woodpeckers peck at trees all day long and don't get concussions or crack their skull open like an egg. Scientists found out they wrap their tongue around their brain inside their skull, and that absorbs the shock. Years ago, there used to be leather helmets, and there used to be a lot of concussions, and like their brain would crack open like an egg. So they decided to make newer helmets, and they added padding inside it, and it reduced concussions, and that padding inside the helmet absorbs the shock, like the woodpecker's tongue.
It's crazy to think that the woodpecker is able to pull its tongue around, wrap it around its brain to prevent a brain injury, isn't it?
Mhm,
Yeah,
yes.
it's fascinating. So what is it, Kendall, that you like about this time of year for the kids? I mean, it's open to everyone, right? It's not just Foundation Academy kids.
Right. It is definitely, we are community based, and we love to reach out to the rest of the community. And so our kids, not only for Jacksonville Science Festival, just on a daily basis, teach each other, and whether it's math, art. And so for them, when they start doing their science projects, it's just the language of the school. And so it's all about teaching and community. And now they get to, speak to the city and whoever comes from out of the city.
And you get thousands of people to this event.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And we have 2,000 students coming on field trips on our Thursday and Friday, 10th and 11th from 9 to 2. So we already have lined up 2,000 students on field trips coming.
And Amanda, that one is at the FSCJ South Campus gym, but there's also another day on April 12th. What's that event?
Yeah, so that Saturday, same thing at Friendship Fountain at Mosh. It'll be indoors and outdoors. So we're gonna set up again for our third day. And
is it important for people to come and kind of see what these kids are creating and listen to them and talk to them about their projects?
Yeah, and so first of all, it gives the kids a chance to teach what they've learned, but then it also is just going to inspire the community, to, maybe they might find something interesting that they want to pursue.
You guys, are you excited about this, Ryan?
Yes.
Yeah? You, Abishai?
Yes.
Yeah? And are you nervous?
A little bit. Yeah, a little. My nerves are going away now.
Are they? They're going away. Were you nervous about today?
Yes.
All right. Well, you did great. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Welcome.
All right. Amanda Lopez, Kendall Schmidt, Ryan Garner, and Abishai Altenor, thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you for listening. That's our program. If you missed anything, you can catch our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight, or you can find our entire archive at WJCT.org or on your favorite podcast platform. The executive producer of First Coast Connect is David Luckin. Our show's produced by Stacey Bennett and directed by Brady Coram. Jamie Valet is our associate producer, and our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. Join us Monday when we look at how Atlantic Beach residents say city officials are not addressing their environmental priorities. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
51st Annual Home Tour on April 12th and 13th, featuring 12 properties and 9 architectural styles in support of preserving historic Jacksonville neighborhoods. Tickets available at 904tix.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.